Welcome to the Chaos Sector. We return to the Matrix. Well, they've started Operation Election Rigged. Everyone knew it was coming. Hillary Clinton claims Trump's rally in Madison Square Garden was basically a modern Hitler party of thousands of Nazis, with Trump raising his arm out, extending it to his loyal followers, preparing to rule as a dictator over the United States with sheer dominance and anger. Except for the fact that, there were blacks, whites, Hispanics, Mexican Americans, Muslims, Asians, and get this, there were even Jews at the rally as well. Damn, never thought so many non-white citizens were Nazis. Who would have thunk it, right? Do you see this image of Hillary Clinton? This is a facial expression of someone with a compulsive obsessive Trump derangement disorder. Then you have Tim Walz, coming out echoing the same crap as Hillary. The nerve of this guy, right? Just gonna ignore his creepy governance in Minnesota, letting children be exposed to child pornography, child trafficking running rampant, and also kidnapping children from their parents because they refuse to identify them as the opposite sex. These people need to be locked up. Now, before we get into the episode, everyone is talking about the jokes that the comedian told at the rally. Tony Hinchcliffe made some offensive jokes about Puerto Rico, referring to it as a, quote, floating island of garbage, unquote. Yeah, that was not the right place to make such a joke, considering the racial climate Trump is always floating around in. So, yeah, it needed to be condemned, and the Trump campaign did just that. But how about Tim Walz, though? So you're Kamala Harris's running mate, and while she's getting obliterated on the campaign trail, you're sitting around playing video games with AOC? Are you kidding me? You see, this is how Democrats stab each other in the back. Instead of Walz out there fighting for the campaign, he's playing video games in the last days of the election. He knows they have no chance at beating Trump. So, might as well kick back and play some video games. Meanwhile, Harris is taking a flat-out beating on the trail, completely abandoned by her running mate. It's insanity, right? And AOC doesn't know what to do with herself neither. The radical left is just about ready to give up. I mean, really think about the optics of this. Tim Walz has been running around like a chicken with its head cut off this entire presidential campaign, and all of a sudden, he has jumped ship on Harris. Oh yes, this is what has happened. AOC and Tim Walz have jumped ship on Kamala Harris. They know she is done for, and they've decided to play goddamn video games in the heat of the presidential election. Democrats stabbed old Joe in the back once they saw he was going to lose to Trump, put Harris in as his replacement, then took that same knife and stabbed Harris in the back once they realized she was about to lose. And the exit strategy is the same strategy Democrats have been using the entire time. Trump is Hitler. That Madison Square Garden rally was very important because, for one, Trump was in the heart of the Democrats' wheelhouse in New York, and he drew about 20,000 people to the rally. But Trump is a native New Yorker, so despite the left's attacks, his return will obviously draw huge numbers to his rally. Hillary Clinton couldn't stand the sight of that and was overwhelmed with anger. And Kamala Harris goes down to Texas. For who knows what reason? Well, she didn't really go for herself, you see. She was actually endorsing another wacko leftist running against Ted Cruz. But in her rally, she relies once again on Hollyweird celebrities, who end up leaving after a brief moment, and Harris is then booed into oblivion. Texas is a Republican state. Houston is a Democratic city. But even those residents in Houston were not excited to see Kamala Harris. They just wanted to see a performance from their hometown gals. In other words, many people didn't come to the rally for Harris. Rather, they thought Beyoncé and Kelly Rowland would be performing. And when they left after brief speeches, the boos started to flood the crowd. And perhaps the most humiliating moment is when Harris responded to the boos in telling the hecklers to go to the smaller rally down the street, in which, there wasn't another rally down the street. So what rally was she talking about? Who the hell knows? She thought a quick comeback would make her look tough, when in reality, she was confused and felt the pressure of basically being ignored at her own rally. Most of them were anticipating a performance from Beyoncé and Rowland, only to be left with a stuttering, low-energy presidential candidate. It was priceless. She is losing her wits about herself, and is falling apart right before the nation's eyes. And the campaign just can't seem to go any further than women's rights. Beyoncé and Rowland were endorsing Harris for the same tired rhetoric of women's rights. Kamala Harris is struggling with men, right? And instead of trying to gain those votes, with something like an increase in federal grants for college students, targeting young black and Hispanic, and even Mexican-American men, or how about increasing federal grants for trade schools so young black, Hispanic, and Mexican-American men can obtain trades, which helped them obtain great paying jobs in the workforce. Oh, let's just keep ramming our heads against the wall blabbering about women's rights. It literally says vote for reproductive freedom. That's your campaign pitch? Abortion is not a major issue in the nation, even for women. Reproductive freedom is actually having the right to give birth, reproducing, but they can't call it abortion freedom because it sounds cruel, so they have to word it in a way that sounds genuine. It actually insults the intelligence of women when you think about it. Slogans such as trust women, making it a gender divide. And the problem is, the woman running for president is a complete garbage dumpster fire. Beyoncé and Kelly dipped pretty fast, and the crowd was left with an android, which those same crowd members, many of them women, were left dissatisfied with only Harris left on the stage. And then there's more. Apparently those Harris rallies drew a bit of frustration. There's a viral clip from that rally, where a grown woman, yes, an adult, was seen yelling at a child. I repeat, yelling at a child. Now, what we gather from that video is the father and daughter were apparently, not too fond of Kamala Harris. Perhaps a Trump supporter? Now, the individuals surrounding the two were already heckling them. And the young woman specifically got right into the child's face and yelled at her. Absolutely disgraceful. And the irony of the event advocating for women and their rights. But a young woman is yelling in the face of a young girl. And the females were acting as if she was wrong for doing it, but literally watched her walk past them, stand in front of the young girl, and even started yelling at her before they so-called stopped her. Negative. I believe the father and daughter were already targeted at the event. This is why that wacky feminist just walked right up to them. If you recall, there was a male heckling Harris at her Houston rally, and there were others booing her. I think this small group cherry-picked out a white man and his daughter among all the other hecklers, and instead of dealing with the father, they decided to bully the little girl. But she seems tougher than them if you ask me. She never cried. She looked the wacko dead in the eyes. That a girl. These are examples of toxic females who are so out of control they will bully a young girl. And we have to assume the father was a Trump supporter because the lady in the orange hat was telling the father and child to, quote, take their asses home, unquote, meaning they weren't welcomed at the rally. So it's safe to say the father was either a Trump supporter or he simply didn't support Harris. Now it could be that he was the one heckling Harris at the event, but nevertheless, you don't attack the child. What do you expect from wacky childless cat ladies who have abortions as their 9-to-5 occupation?
And what about Michelle Obama coming out and basically saying all men are to blame for Harris's epic collapse? I mean, who died and made her queen, How dare she come out and scrutinize men for not supporting a lackluster candidate? You see, this is the problem with elitism in politics. You have a former first lady who has been blabbering on and on, yet has done absolutely nothing for Kamala Harris from the inception of her nomination, nor for women as a whole. What has Michelle Obama done for women and women of color? Nothing. She's racked in hundreds of millions for speaking events and sold books. Fine, get your money. It's America. But what you don't do is spew rhetoric that tries to pit men against women, and yet pointing the finger at the political opponent for divisive rhetoric. Quote, "This is real." Excerpts from Michelle Obama's speech on the election. Michelle Obama made the case for Vice President Kamala Harris on Saturday night in Kalamazoo, Michigan, with a striking speech about the consequences that the election will have for women's bodies and reproductive health. Oh, really? What about the women's bodies that are being beaten to a pulp by transgender boxers? Oh, I guess those women don't count. Quote, "Do not put our lives in the hands of politicians, mostly men. I want folks to understand the chilling effect, not just on critical abortion care, but on the entirety of women's health. All of it. There are good reasons who so many women and physicians are horrified by what's happened since Donald Trump's justices overturned Roe v. Wade. We're seeing women scrambling across state lines to get the care they need." Oh, okay. Don't you mean you're seeing women scrambling across state lines to abort children? It's such an old played-out argument from the left. Stop trying to gaslight other women into thinking most women are strongly supporting this nonsense, because they're not. Quote, "This is real." So, do you think Donald Trump is thinking about the consequences for the millions of women who will be living in medical deserts? Does anyone think he has the emotional maturity and foresight to come up with a plan to protect us? Y'all, we are teetering on the edge. It's madness. I have to keep stopping to address this. All gloves are off. Michelle Obama thinks she is exempt from being blasted like every other corrupt politician, which she isn't, by the way. She hides behind the historical wall of her husband's presidency, thinking she can just say whatever the hell comes to mind, and everyone is supposed to acknowledge it. Negative. It's so pathetic, and although it appears she has class, Michelle Obama does not have class. Because if she did, she wouldn't be spewing out this garbage. Protect us? From what? Illegal immigrants who are lurking in the shadows as a college student jogs in her neighborhood and kidnaps her, rapes her, then murders her? Or what about the young girls who are treated the same way? Don't they need protection? Oh, some self-righteous heathen needs to be protected so she can go to some clinic and abort a child. And let me address that because it's important. According to studies, most abortions are performed in the first 12 to 13 weeks of pregnancy, or first trimester. The fetus, or baby, yes I said it, the baby's gender can be identified approximately around 14 weeks, or non-invasive prenatal testing can provide results at 10 weeks. Is it safe to say that most abortions are done because the infant is male? Interesting. Anywho, quote, and this will not just affect women, it will affect you and your sons. The devastating consequences of teen pregnancy won't just be borne by young girls, but also by the young men who are the fathers. They too will have their dreams of going to college. Their entire future is totally upended by an unwanted pregnancy. Oh my fucking days. This is unacceptable. This lady needs to be shut down immediately. Teen pregnancy? Unwanted pregnancy? Let's put this scenario into perspective to show how wicked Michelle Obama is. So teenagers have sex, which is the problem, and Michelle advocates for the teenagers to abort the child because their lives drastically change due to having sex. Yeah, I got it. Have you ever thought about advocating for teaching teenagers to practice abstinence? When's the last time Michelle Obama, in all of her public speaking events, went to high schools and even middle schools and motivated teenagers to abstain from sex so they can pursue those dreams? This is why Trump will win, because they are batshit crazy. It's the same thing her husband said years ago, literally the same thing. Paraphrasing, quote, if my daughter comes home pregnant, I would look into if she should keep the child or not, because I don't want her burdened with a baby, unquote. That's basically what he said, and Michelle is saying the same thing. Let's just disregard the teenage sexual activity, which in itself will destroy those very dreams and goals, because teenagers are not mature enough to balance sexual activity and their life journey, the way adults can. Heck, some adults can't even balance their sex life with their priorities. But let Michelle Obama tell it. Teenagers should be allowed to have sex, but not face the consequences of it. You know, I hope our audience appreciates our reporting because nobody truly breaks this madness down the way we do. I can't continue though. It's frustrating.
I hear ya. It's unbelievable. Michelle Obama, in all of her so-called women empowerment speeches, has never advocated for those very teenagers to inspire the young people to abstain from sexual activity. And before anyone claims it's a bit unsophisticated for her to address the youth regarding sex and sexual activity, well, she sure as hell doesn't seem to have a problem addressing their sexual activity regarding abortions. Now does she? A horrible role model, despite the illusion of being a so-called pioneer for women empowerment. Because behind all of the guest appearances on The View, all of her books, public speaking events, she basically turns her nose up at the youth who do make mistakes, but hasn't focused on helping them make better choices in life. Instead of addressing the problem, such as having the same girl talk moments with her Hollywood buddies and far-left feminists on television, where the conversations with young women and mothers in the inner cities regarding safe sex, abstinence, and focus on accomplishing goals. She has never done it, only when, guess what, election time comes around and when she is advocating for abortion rights. Let's continue before I pull my hair out. Quote, I am asking you all from the core of my being to take our lives seriously. Please. Do not put our lives in the hands of politicians, mostly men who have no clue or do not care about what we as women go through, who don't fully grasp the broad-reaching health implications that their misguided policies will have on our health outcomes. This is so pathetic. You know why there are comedy skits of men going into the garage, away from their wives? Is because of this ultra-sensitive blabbering that women such as this use to manipulate men. Most women are not this way, and the ones that are, more than likely, well, they're single childless cat ladies who advocate for abortions. It's whining and blabbering about every little thing. No, that is not the general depiction of women in society. How many women who are either in relationships or married are complaining to their boyfriends or husbands, whining about other women complaining about women's rights? A very small percentage. Because women in relationships with men are instinctively inclined to think about marriage and starting a family. And that brings up another point. Most of the women advocating for abortion are not women who are in relationships or married. So Michelle Obama is speaking for a percentage of women who are single. Being single does not mean you're miserable, but apparently these women are in fact miserable, which Michelle Obama wants to keep it that way. Quote, the only people who have standing to make these decisions are women, with the advice of their doctors. We are the ones with the knowledge and experience to know what we need. Okay, so what these psychopaths often do as strawman points is conflate abortion rights with health complications during pregnancies. It's so disgusting, and it's the only thin thread of a strawman they have in the debate. They need that as a crutch because without the health complications, well, women are just flat out having abortions because, get this, it's their right. They're doing it anyway. Anyway, so please do not hand our fates over to the likes of Trump, who knows nothing about us, who has shown deep contempt for us. Because a vote for him is a vote against us, against our health, against our worth. Oh my fucking, what drug has this lady been smoking? Hand your fate over to Trump? A vote for him is a vote against women? Really? This may be one of the worst cases of Trump derangement syndrome. It's astonishing. So, basically, Michelle Obama is trying to mobilize all women to vote for Kamala Harris. It's that simple. But the crowd you're speaking to, aren't they voting for Harris anyway? You see, Michelle knows even women and some women on the left are voting for Harris, and they are leaning over to voting for Trump. How arrogant to speak to those women, as if they are not informed about Roe v. Wade, what laws have been updated or revised, and how they fit into the equation. Trump overturned Roe v. Wade, and everything was sent back to the states. Oh, but what if a woman wants an abortion in a state that bans abortion? Okay, let's see here. How about stop having unprotected sex? And you won't have that problem. That's one way to fix it. I mean, find it quite ironic that most feminists make up the larger percentage of abortion advocates who despise men. Second, a large percentage of women having abortions are not in fact women. They're teenagers. Once again, where are the women's rights groups and organizations teaching the youth to abstain from sexual activity as minors? They don't care. And the reason they don't care is because a significant percentage of those minors and even women are in the lower class. And then there's another element. Don't see too many Hispanic women and Mexican American women being preached to about abortion rights, right? Seems it's mainly black females and liberal white females. We can suggest, of course based on the origins of abortion, is to keep the black population at a smaller percentage. Now look at that. The same Democratic Party claims that the Republicans fear the quote, browning of America. How is this when most of the abortions are in the lower class from black females? Seems there is a specific lineage they want to keep from populating the black community. I think I know what lineage that is, and it's the African American lineage within the black community. Isn't that what Margaret Sanger was so concerned about? Eugenics, my friends. Keep in mind, this woman has a statue that is still erected despite literally planning population control in the black community. So when you put this all into perspective, you see that abortion has a very simple solution, especially for the majority of females who are having them, that being minors. But you know, Michelle Obama doesn't care that those minors are having sex. She only cares that they have the right to abort the pregnancy and ensure their futures won't be destroyed. We all know that teenagers will not become abstinent after such an abortion. They will continue to get pregnant and have more abortions. You have to address the issue at hand, not justify killing a human life due to the bad decisions. Now let's think about it a bit deeper. States that ban abortion, well, wouldn't it be best for females, minors, and adults to make sure they are having protected sex if they do not desire to have children? Because even if Roe v. Wade was brought back, does this mean those females will live in a utopia full of joy and bliss? Negative. What about the fathers of those children? What about the parents who may have wanted grandchildren? What about siblings who can't have children who wanted a nephew or niece? And then there's more. What if there was a law that required the woman who didn't want the child to give the father of the child custody after birth? How about that? Isn't that a compromise? Because at this very moment, the father does not have any legal right to a decision about a pregnancy. It takes two to tangle, but in their wacky world, the man is seen as nothing more than sexual pleasure, and he has no say-so on the abortion of his offspring. This is why these women are single. They're egotistical. Let's continue. Quote, what side of history do you want to be on? And let me tell you all, to think that the men that we love, to be either unaware or indifferent to our plight, is simply heartbreaking. It is sad. No, wait, let me stop once again. The men you love? Which men are these? Your boyfriends? Your husbands? Negative. There are men in these women's lives, only sex encounters, which they irresponsibly have sex with. Anywho, it is a sad statement about our value as women in this world. It is both a setback in our quest for equity and a huge blow to our country's standing as a world leader on issues of women's health and gender equality. So fellas, before you cast your votes, ask yourselves, what side of history do you want to be on? Yeah, keep in mind, this is the former First Lady of the United States spewing this garbage out here. Quote, now I recognize that there are a lot of angry, disillusioned people out there upset with the slow pace of change, and I get it. It is reasonable to be frustrated. Wait, what slow pace of change is she referring to here? The slow pace of change from the Harris campaign? Yep, because Harris's brain moves at a slow pace. Quote, we all know we have a lot more work to do in this country. But to anyone out there thinking about sitting out this election, or voting for Donald Trump, or even a third-party candidate, in protest because you're fed up, let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage. What the fuck is that? This woman is a maniac. Goes to show it's not just the wacky white liberal women, right? It's an all-inclusive group of whack jobs. All races of women are possessed by this nonsense. So, are you as men prepared to look into the eyes of the women and children? Oh my fucking. Then you have the nerve to mention children? Fucking maniac. What about when the boyfriend or husband rubs the stomach of his girlfriend or wife, thinking he will be a father, only to have her sneak to a clinic and have an abortion? What about that devastation he feels? What about him telling his family he's going to be a father soon, only to give them the bad news? So, are you as men prepared to look into the eyes of the women and children you love and tell them that you supported this assault on our safety? And to the women listening, we have every right to demand that the men in our lives do better by us. We have to use our voices to make these choices clear to men that we love. Our lives are worth more than their anger and disappointment. And we are more than just baby-making vessels. You know, I'm done. That's it. I actually wanted to pull my hair out. Anyone want to take it from here?
Yeah, boy, I tell you, Democrats have opened the gates of hell upon society. We called it, though, long ago, my friends. The closer you get to the election, the crazier everything gets. I'm giving it to you straight. I like my whiskey off the rocks. I ain't no damn Republican. I ain't no damn Democrat. I ain't none of that garbage. But if you're an American who works your ass off to the bone to provide for your future generations, then I'm the right person for this message, Tots. Michelle Obama thinks so lowly of women, for one, to think that they're just airheads who do not care about anything else other than their women's rights. Look around. Women's rights are everywhere. There are women's health facilities. There are women's organizations. Women, honestly, are more powerful than they even realized. Wars were fought over women, although some would argue that those wars were fought for, quote, possession of women. Sure, but women are also wives who help men balance out their aggressive nature, help them express themselves more, not so emotional, but more so in a direct manner. I ain't no dagnabbit fluffy tail, and I like my women to be soft and affectionate. Makes for great companionship. That's all we humans desire anyways. Women are also mothers who give birth to great men and great women. They are leaders. They provide much needed wisdom to others, especially their children and grandchildren. They nurse the children throughout their childhood. I mean, should I keep breaking down how much women are valued in the human species? Oh, one would say women still don't get paid the same as a man for the same job. Well, there should be tons of lawsuits filed for gender discrimination. They're not sure these are popping up out of the woodworks. But somehow the statistics exist. What about in sports such as the WNBA? Why don't the women get paid as much as the men? Well, you need to ask the league owner that question, who is also a woman. Heck, even women don't support the league. Go figure. I personally admire the tenacity of the women's college basketball, to be honest. But the main issue women like Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris are blabbering about is linked to men as well. They use the health risk as a way to put up a barrier of the man being able to challenge an abortion. You see, without the health risk as an excuse. For some, of course, it prevents a man from challenging the abortion, in which a new law would have the courts rule that the woman proceeds with the pregnancy, gives birth, and then the man gains custody of the child. Throughout the pregnancy, though, she will be provided health care services free of charge and other related maternal expenses to make the pregnancy less stressful. Now, wouldn't this satisfy both sides? The woman doesn't want the child. The man does. She gives birth. Then the man gains custody. Just bouncing ideas around. I want to go back to Margaret Sanger, because this is where it all started. In 1939, Sanger introduced a project called the Negro Project. Quote, in order to make the project most effective, she suggested that certain black ministries be recruited to support the birth control project. Since the most effective educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal, as historian George Grant has written, the program's genocidal intentions were carefully camouflaged beneath several layers of condescending social service rhetoric and organizational expertise. Well, I'll be a hopping toad prince, because that sounds quite familiar to the Democratic Party of today, now doesn't it? It was the Democratic Party that founded the Ku Klux Klan. Like the citizens of Hamelin, lured into captivity by the sweet serenades of the Pied Piper, all too many African Americans all across the country happily fell into step behind Margaret and the eugenic racists she had placed on her Negro Advisory Council. Margaret Sanger opened her first birth control clinic in 1916 in a downtrodden part of New York City, where the, quote, inferior races and human weeds lived immigrant Southern Europeans, Slavs, Latins, and Jews. By 1939, Sanger had honed her skills with support from many eugenics racists. Her Negro Advisory Council established clinics all over the South, distributing contraceptives to the, quote, reckless, irresponsible swarming and spawning, diseased elements of humanity, unquote. With the support of the hand-picked black ministers and state public health officials, the slick propaganda literature Planned Parenthood moved along smoothly in its genocidal goals. Not satisfied with just community-based clinics, Planned Parenthood moved into the public schools in the 1980s, primarily in the inner-city minority neighborhoods. But contraceptive offerings provided only one of the services promoted by Sanger. Sterilization of non-whites also lay at the center of Planned Parenthood's agenda, and several states established pilot programs for primarily minority victims. California's role began in 1909 and lasted for 70 years. At least 20,000 sterilizations in state institutions were performed during that time. In a prominent museum in Boston, Margaret Sanger is included in a list of revolutionary heroes that include George Washington and George Whitefield, the great evangelist. She was unpopular in her day, except among sexual revolutionaries, socialists, and various racist eugenicists. On a side note, again, the same groups advocate for Planned Parenthood today. You got the sexual revolutionaries, better known as feminists, then you got the socialists, and the subtle racist eugenicists, such as Democratic politicians manipulating the vulnerable. As the saying goes, history repeats itself until somebody listened. Yet now her ideas receive not just sanction but privilege, and the consequences of those ideas have claimed the lives of millions of innocent babies. Now this from a website called landmarkevents.org. Now we all know this woman was executing population control in the lower class communities. But what are some of the similarities between that movement and what Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris share? Women's rights. You see, Planned Parenthood was disguised behind so-called women's rights. That was the, quote, legitimate concern she advocated for. But like a massage parlor that runs a brothel in the back room, it was all a front. Sanger wanted to keep the black population low in numbers, in contrast to whites and upper-class groups. And to accomplish this goal, she used black people to convince the population that her causes were for a common good. It's quite scary how it aligns with the Democratic Party and how they also use black people to manipulate the population to vote for that party. Women's rights included Planned Parenthood as the primary goal not only for the black population, but Sanger also saw the woman's right to not bear children. It meant that that woman was equal to men. You know, when you listen to a feminist blabber on and on, realize that all of them have studied this madwoman, including Michelle and Kamala. You ever wondered why the left is so hardwired in advocating for abortion? It's because they are continuing the agenda of Margaret Sanger. It's been exposed, but I'll ask it again. How many Planned Parenthood clinics are in the lower class communities? Now, how many do you think are in the middle to upper class communities? Exactly. And the even more disturbing issue here is that Michelle Obama, a black woman, and Kamala Harris, another so-called black woman, are advocating for abortion, which was pushed by racist eugenicists who wanted to keep their people's population low, as she saw them as animals who couldn't behave like civilized human beings. And Planned Parenthood endorses, guess who? That's right, most of the prominent Democratic politicians. Hillary Clinton even praised Margaret Sanger in a speech. Barack Obama also thanked the organization for, I guess, helping rebuild the black family unit or something. Oh, that's right, for dumping hundreds of abortion clinics in the lower class communities. And of course, we have Michelle Obama lulling women to sleep, especially black women, in making them feel as if their rights are being defended and protected. When in reality, all the Democrats are doing and have done is dismiss those who they deem to be insignificant. Well, they're significant come election time. Isn't that right, Michelle? That's right. I'm done. Oh, one more thing. If Michelle Obama thinks for 1 second that men, and I mean real men, if she thinks for 1 second that men will allow her to insult them, treat them like it's their fault. A woman drives across state lines to get an abortion. You got another thing coming, Missy Poo. That gaslighting nonsense don't work on real men. Take that crap over yonder. And you see, all of this covert activity is being exposed like a rooster caught snoozing round sunrise. This election ain't between men and women. Voters ain't thinking about no dagnabbit gender. The mainstream media is trying to create that garbage. They're all over the friggin' place. But we see the silly games make it about race and gender as an excuse for Harris's epic failure in front of the American people. They're gonna rig the election, I reckon. But Trump, I tell you, that's a tough son of a gun. He better keep those eyelids open. Just wanted to vent a little.
Yeah, they're starting to show their hand. It's obvious there is no way Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. Republicans know it, independents know it, libertarians know it, and Democrats know it. This is why they have abandoned her on the campaign trail. There's only so much Hollywood celebrities can do for her. At some point, she's got to walk the walk. Well, she's not even talking the talk, to be honest. But they're going around blowing up ballot boxes in Oregon, go figure. Quote, fires set in drop boxes, destroy hundreds of ballots in Washington, and damage 3 in Oregon. Portland, Oregon, incendiary devices were set off Monday at 2 ballot drop boxes, one in Portland and another nearby Vancouver, Washington, destroying hundreds of ballots in what one official called a direct attack on democracy, about a week before a heated election day. Wait, it's not a heated election, nor will it be a heated election day. Trump will win in a landslide, and this is why they're blowing up ballot boxes. Also, using the phrase, a direct attack on democracy, is a form of damage control, of course. We all know some wacko liberal in Oregon was sent to set fire to that ballot box, which consists of Trump votes. The governor of Oregon and the mayor let their residents smoke freaking crack cocaine for fuck's sake. So we all know it was to prevent Trump votes from being tallied. The same election official then comes out and pretends it's a threat to whatever anyway. The early morning fire at the drop box in Portland was extinguished quickly, thanks to a suppression system inside the box, as well as a nearby security guard, police said, and just 3 ballots were damaged there. But within a few hours, another fire was discovered at a transit center drop box across the Columbia River in Vancouver. Vancouver is the biggest city in Washington's 3rd district, the site of what is expected to be one of the closest U.S. House races in the country. That race is between first-term Democratic Representative Marie Glussenkamp and Republican challenger Joe Kent. Now, let's just bypass the so-called culprit and focus on the election officials, because they are behind this. Now, isn't it quite ironic that they didn't reveal which political affiliation those ballots were for? It's simple. Democrats are at risk of losing seats in the House, and we all know if Republicans gain firm control of Congress, as they are projected to gain control of the Senate, well, no more wacko legislation being passed. So, the Venom theory is being applied here. Democrats know they aren't winning this election, so a small victory will be to retain many seats in Congress. Now, before we continue, let's look at how Wikipedia describes both candidates. I find this interesting. As you see, Glussenkamp's description is basically a member of the Democratic Party, right? But if we look at Kent's description, it says Kent's a far-right Republican. Now, this is how they depict him, and it's based on what, you guessed it, Kent's take on the 2020 election. Sprinkle in some previous communication with Nick Fuentes, and he's a neo-Nazi. Some may say, well, isn't that enough evidence? Well, what about all of the people calling Trump Hitler? They were once foaming at the mouth wanting him to appear on their shows, right? The point, it's all bullshit. But he's automatically slated an election denier, far-right conspiracy theorists, even though there is evidence of election interference in his battle with Glussenkamp currently. Simply put, you can't keep hiding the truth. Anyway, let's continue. Quote, ballot drop boxes have faced increasing criticism from Republicans and have been the focus of baseless right-wing conspiracy theories in recent years, tied to former President Donald Trump's lie that the 2020 election was stolen from him. Again, you see, only baseheads think there are baseless claims and right-wing conspiracy theories. How ironic. They're covering a recent incident where ballot boxes were set on fire, which obviously is to prevent specific ballots for specific political candidates from being submitted, and still trying to debunk Donald Trump. Was this a complaint from Republicans? Negative. They injected Republicans into the equation to inject Donald Trump into the equation and debunk the claims the previous election was rigged. And get a load of this madness. By doing so, basically are discrediting the very story they're reporting about. Oh my days, this is bonkers. Again, let me reiterate. They are reporting about some wacko setting fire to ballot boxes, right? Okay, now what is this considered? This is considered election interference. Now, if this is election interference at the congressional level, not the presidential level, does anyone truly believe that the presidential election will go unscathed? Get the entire fuck out of here. But let's continue though. Quote, an Associated Press survey of state election officials across the U.S. found that there were no widespread issues with drop boxes in 2020 and none that could have affected the results. Why are you talking about the 2020 election? Aren't you supposed to be focusing on the fucking ballot boxes that were just set on fire in 2 locations, one in Oregon and another in Washington? Isn't that the story? This is damage fucking control. 6 states have banned drop boxes since 2020. Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, South Carolina, and South Dakota, according to research by the Voting Rights Lab, which advocates for expanding voting access. Other states restricted their use, including Ohio and Iowa, which now permits only 1 drop box per country, according to the Brennan Center for Justice. Yeah, justice. How about doing the story justice and focusing on the culprits who tried to blow up ballot boxes? Get to the bottom of it, aren't you journalists? The FBI was also investigating. The fire suppression systems inside the ballot drop boxes in Washington and Oregon were designed to activate when the temperature inside reaches a certain point, coating ballots with a fire-suppressing powder. Oh, really? How sophisticated, hey? Seems there's a history of setting fire to ballot boxes. Might want to have election security surveilling the boxes around the clock until election season is over. Hey? After all, you don't want a candidate's ballots to get damaged, which could lead to unpredictable circumstances and recounts, right? The FBI, as always, is running around overseeing this nonsense. And talk about election interference. Oh my days, a federal government agency is literally slithering around in local, state, and national election cycles, and nobody cares. The reason we pointed this out is because this is exactly what's going to happen in the presidential election. That's why they keep gaslighting the public and thinking it's a close race. So if Harris wins, it would look convincing. If she loses, it will still look convincing. Kamala Harris has already conceded defeat. Democrats have conceded defeat. And the mainstream media has stubbornly conceded defeat in a subliminal manner. Nobody actually believes she has a chance. And I blame her campaign staff, because they could have at least attempted to make her campaign presidential. You can't do what Trump does. He can run around and literally act like a complete jackass. But his policies shut all of that down at the snap of the finger. Harris did not have the luxury of trying to mudsling, because her record as vice president and her record in the past needed to be clarified for the nation. She never did it. Hillary Clinton tries one last futile effort to beg the American people not to vote for Trump, but she only reminds them of how miserable she still is over her loss. And if you think about it, Trump has actually had 3 terms as president. Crazy, right? In conclusion, the election will be rigged, and the reason they keep going back to the 2020 election is because if Harris wins, well, I think most Americans would be on Trump's side if he contests the results of the election. Guess the majority of the country are insurrectionists, hey? This is the chaos sector.